The problem is that we've taken the visual representation and placed it above health. Health now is below the aesthetic, below the look. And whenever you have what's a disorder, what I mean by disorder is the wrong order. If health is below the aesthetic, then like a false god, the aesthetic starts to tyrannize health.
Welcome to the Mindset Mirror Connection podcast, the podcast where we debunk the eat less, move more, shrink more mentality and focus on what really matters, which includes your relationship with your body, food, self-worth, and the behaviors that align with all of those. I'm your host, Christina Hathaway, licensed therapist with specialized training in food and body obsession, certified personal trainer and nutrition coach. At the Mindset Mirror Connection podcast, we believe what you say in your mind, you see in the mirror. So let's have a conversation about that. Before we get into today's amazing episode, I want to make sure you've hit that follow button wherever you're listening to the Mindset Mirror Connection podcast. Also, if you like to listen to this pod on the go, make sure you have those downloads turned on. As always, I love a 5-star rating and review, and I want to thank you for your continued support. Now, let's get into the episode. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Mindset Mirror Connection podcast. Today, we have one of the most trusted individuals in the wellness space spending time with us, Mr. Sal Di Stefano. Sal, who is one of the co-hosts of Mind Pump, which is one of the most successful health and wellness podcasts in the industry. He started his passion with health and wellness around age 13. He became a personal trainer at 18. He was a general manager at 24 Hour Fitness at 19, then became the owner of a wellness studio, and his reputation and respect not only show that he was more than just a personal trainer, but he was gifted in business. And today he's bringing those gifts to us, talking about all things body image. I think it's very important to recognize that men also are vulnerable to body image, especially those in the wellness space. Sal goes deep with us. He helps us understand what he has felt, what he is going through, where it's come from. And then he gives you tidbits to walk away with on how you can begin to start healing yourself and supporting respect towards your body. We also talk about disordered eating and aesthetics in regards to the wellness industry, plus his recent connection to God and how that has influenced his healing and recovery in regards to his own body image struggles. It was really just such a wonderful conversation. The authenticity and connection and knowledge that Sal brings to this episode is going to blow your socks off. Everyone, welcome Sal Di Stefano to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, Christina. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I'm so excited to have this conversation. As I was going through organizing it and the questions, I realized that I've had some questions for you in my back pocket for a long time. So I'm actually excited to sit down and go through them today. So again, thank you for making this priority today.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And I know we've been in groups and stuff before where we've had kind of discussions, and you've always been really encouraging and added great. I know your background you have a background in a lot of this stuff, and it's, I think there's so much crossover to coaching. There's a lot good coaches can learn from people with a therapist background.
No, it's so true. And I think that one of the reasons why I connect with you personally is the way that you do think about that and how you look at health and wellness from this collective lens. And I think that has a lot to do with just knowing your story and seeing how you utilize like a multidisciplinary approach to wellness in general, but then how that has translated into your own perceptions and knowledge and coaching. So let's get right into it, because like I said,
Sure.
I have a ton of questions, and this one is actually very specific. So today I really want to dive into the world of body image, especially as a man, and especially knowing that you've openly discussed your struggles. You've mentioned that a lot of your insecurities as a child was just being a smaller boy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Smaller teenager. But you also speak highly, and for good reason, of coming from an immigrant family.
Yeah.
And as a Hispanic woman myself, I'm third generation. I'm half Hispanic, half Italian. And I know the work ethic and the grind and that mentality that my family brought to the table. And I hear often from you, like seeing your father, who was this very strong-willed, very hardworking man, And I'm curious if you ever recognize a crossover between some of that insecurity you had as a child and then also kind of having this front row seat to that strength and output and endurance that you saw from your father. Have you ever considered if that crossover ever happened, or do you have any insights to how that might have go ahead?
It's actually even more specific than that. So it's funny because you said some of my insecurities started from being kind of a smaller teenage boy. The truth is, I was a normal sized kid. I was 6 foot tall by the time I was 15. Yeah, I was skinny, but 14, 15-year-old boy isn't skinny, especially one that grows as fast as I did. I wasn't overly skinny. If I look at pictures now, I can see that so much of it was just in my head, was just my perception, which typically this is how things like this spiral out of control. I think part of it started from feeling inadequate because I wasn't like this super physical, like athletically minded kid growing up. I was very much into reading. I was into deep discussions. I wasn't your normal kid, I think. I subscribed to Omni magazine when I was a teenager. I don't know if you know what that is, but that's a old like science magazine. And I'm a 13-year-old reading this stuff. My dad was very physical. He was a judo champion when he was a kid, worked physical labor since he was 9. Very physical. And that's how he knew how to connect. So he didn't have really a relationship with his dad. He grew up very, very poor. And again, 9 years old is when he started working in order to bring money home to help support his family. So he didn't go to school past the age of 9. And his relationship with his dad was, dad comes home from work sometimes, works real hard. And if we make too much noise, he gets really mad and can be physical. Okay. And so that was pretty much his relationship with his dad. And maybe they related through work, like when he would go work with his dad. So we kind of related that way. So my dad was doing the best he could. And the way he knew how to relate was through physicality. And I just wasn't that kid. And so I became very aware that I wasn't that kid. I'd see my cousins connect with their dads in that way. And we'd all get together. And I just wasn't like that. And so I felt a bit inadequate or insecure. I remember one time my dad and his cousins, so they're all immigrants, right? They had us boys get together to race because they'd be like, this is fun. Why don't you see who's the fastest? And I remember I went to take off and I fell. And I felt so embarrassed that I fell. And I remember my dad helping me up, and I thought he was embarrassed. Now, he probably wasn't, but that's what I thought that he was.
Of course.
He could also be critical. And again, this is just kind of the way he was raised. So he would make critical comments to me, like if I was sitting down watching TV too long, or if I wasn't going outside or doing a lot of the other things. And so that fueled this like feeling of inadequacy. And we bought a weight set. My dad bought a weight set when I was it was like a free weight set, probably when I was 14 or 13. And that's when I got introduced to strength training. And it felt very empowering because it was something I could do that could change this, or at least influence the way that I perceive myself. And I was somewhat good at it, or at least I could study it and learn it. And I became obsessed with it right out the gates. And because I got this kind of positive reinforcement from it, and because it kind of helped satisfy this feeling of inadequacy, which we'll talk about this later, really doesn't really ever solve that. But, in the moment, it feels like it does. I became quite obsessed. Then I worked in the fitness industry at 18, and I was right out the gates really good at it. I was the top salesperson in the gym by the second week. And 3 months later, I was managing a fitness department. And then by the time I'm 19, I'm a general manager. So I'm getting all this confirmation. And so this persona was built, or part of my persona was built around this. And thankfully, I love helping people. So that's always kind of kept me pointed in the right direction. But those insecurities never really went away. I'm a lot better with them now, for sure. But they're still there. And I know I still have some dysfunction with how I approach exercise and nutrition. But yeah, those, especially in the early days, there was a lot of things that I did that were really unhealthy in pursuit of trying to become this strong, jacked guy and thinking that that would change everything when it doesn't.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think that most people do assume that that's true because if we look at every marketing, media, everything out there in the world, you believe that once your body is changed, you are more attractive, you're going to be more confident, you're going to be more accepted. And then also understanding your story and where some of those insecurities around athleticism, and even it sounds like there was a sense of comparison to your cousins, right? So your peers, that would make sense for you. It would make sense to pick up the weights. Plus what you said, you could research it. So it also connected to something that you felt confident in, which was your intellect, right? So it makes perfect sense to me. But then, as you said, like we will discuss that we're constantly searching for a need to be met, especially when we get to these extreme levels. That until something happens, we don't even realize that it was never the body that needed to change in the first place. It was something else.
Yeah.
So I want to jump into that. So you get into weightlifting. I know I watched a lot of your content, and you talked about how every year your bicep needed to be as big as your age. Well,
that's right. Yeah. Yeah, when I was 14, I wanted to be 14 inches, 15, 16. By the time I got to 17, then it started slowing down. But it was constantly taking measurements and trying to progress in that way. And it was really just this hyper focus. And like I said this earlier, but the saving grace was that I really loved training people. And I really cared about the people I trained. And I cared about the staffs that worked for me when I managed gyms. And that kept me from going too crazy. It's really hard because I can speak to this really well. I mean, you listen to my show. Part of the reason why I can speak to this really well is because I know what it feels like, because I struggle with it. But if it wasn't for training people, and if it wasn't for having staffs that I felt responsible for, oh boy, I would have gone so far off the deep end. But it's really hard to care about someone and speak to them with love and truth, and then not hear it for yourself. It becomes very, if you're trying to be in any way intellectually authentic, you start to hear the double speak, and you start to hear yourself talking to someone and going, well, that's not what I do. That advice is not what I would take. And so it gave me somewhat of guardrails to an extent. I mean, it's definitely been a blessing that I've gotten into this space, because had I not trained people and worked with people, it would have been a lot worse for sure.
Right. Well, it brings the humanness back to it. And I think oftentimes when we see other people's pain and we hear their struggles, it will, if we are, as you mentioned, being authentic in our relationships, it's going to strike a chord in us.
Yeah.
And it's going to expose us to ourselves if we are aware enough. And I think in the industry now, what we're seeing is not someone like yourself. While there are very well-meaning people who want to help others, we do see that in the fitness industry in general, a high prevalence of body dysmorphia, disordered eating, over-exercising. Actually, I've interviewed a gal out of the University of Edinburgh. Her name is Michelle Carroll, and her entire PhD is based out of disordered eating in the fitness industry. And I love that you had that personal connection with your clients. I think that it brings that humanness back to just us working with other people. And honestly, it's such a intimate, vulnerable relationship, the trainer nutrition relationship, because you're exposing some of your secrets to that person, your insecurities, the way you eat, the way you think about yourself. And it does require caring hands, right? And it requires a level of rapport building and trust. I want to swing into kind of how the industry has shifted since the introduction of social media, right? And having so many people who themselves have their own struggles with eating and exercise, and those individuals not having balance with their own bodies, shame and things like that. they're the ones giving the advice. And oftentimes I see that it's very driven by money. It's not actually driven by that rapport and that connection. What do you make up about all of this? What has been your experience coming from someone who started face-to-face and now seeing it evolve into the social media space?
Well, I mean, it's always been this way. The industry was always driven. It's always driven by the visual representation, or what's supposed to be the visual representation of health and fitness. So if we back up for a second, like why do we believe or find fit, healthy bodies more attractive, or why are they more desirable, let's say, for lack of a better term? It's because it's a visual display of better health. That's what it's supposed to be. Okay. It's supposed to be the side effect of being fertile, of being healthy, of having energy, of vitality. Okay.
Did you know that 95% of people that lose weight gain it back and then some? 95%. And the interesting thing, what is my hair doing? The interesting thing is that the wellness community continues to use the same behavioral change approach that causes that 95%. It's crazy. So I thought, well, what about the 5%? What is it that the 5% of people are doing so differently that they keep the weight off and create permanent habits? Well, what I've learned is it's actually not that difficult. It's actually quite different than everything diet culture and the health and wellness community want you to think, because obviously if you know this, you won't have to spend money with them. But I am so kind, and because I have access to trainings that people in the wellness industry do not have access to, I'm going to share this with you. In my 8-week collective, I am teaching you the 5 habits that the most successful individuals do who lose weight and keep it off permanently. With these 5 habits, I'm also going to teach you the amount of flexibility necessary to be consistent with your routine. In this collective, we are going to learn your day-to-day, week-to-week routines, understanding your time, your attention, your schedule. Then you're going to receive a custom roadmap on how to execute those habits. It's all written out for you. Over this time, you're also going to work on the failure narratives that cause self-sabotage. Because what we're learning, it's not reward. It's actually reduce failure in the brain. And over the course of the 8-week period, not only are you going to have more energy, you're going to feel better in your clothes, you're going to have a strong, consistent routine, you're going to end food noise, and you're going to end or reframe at minimum the self-sabotage you experience. So if you're tired of the same old runaround that the fitness industry is trying to tell you works, but we know obviously doesn't, comment Bloom and I will send you information.
The problem is that we've taken the visual representation and place it above health. Okay. So health now is below the aesthetic, below the look. And whenever you have what's a disorder, what I mean by disorder is the wrong order. If health is below the aesthetic, then like a false god, the aesthetic starts to tyrannize health. So you start to compromise. Your health starts to bow and twist and turn to serve this value that's been placed above it. Okay. And so we compromise our health in pursuit of a look. Now, the problem with the industry is that the people that we look at and say that person looks amazing, oftentimes extreme, we think that's the person I'm going to take the advice from. When in reality, this is probably the wrong person to take the advice from, because they're speaking from a place that's not so great. And so a lot of the information comes from these people, and it just fuels this problem. And that's one part of it. I mean, all of media uses sex sells, right? That's what they say. All of media makes us believe that looking a particular way is way more valuable than it actually is. It's more valuable than wisdom. It's more valuable than experience. It's more valuable than being a father or a mother or being an honest person or being a good person. And so we end up chasing this thing that we think is so great. And what's funny is the data on it's quite clear. Beauty's relationship to actual happiness and a sense of purpose is actually, there's very weak relationship. In other words, Arthur Brooks says this well. He's a professor on happiness, a researcher on it. And he says, if you were, let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, a 6 in terms of attractiveness, and you spent all your time and money going from a 6 to a 9, your happiness would barely budge. It would barely change. So it's literally a waste of time if that's what you think you're going to get out of it. Now, someone may point to the data and say, well, exercising and eating right leads to less depression, less anxiety, better happiness. What are you talking about? I thought you said that there is no relationship. That's not true. We're looking at the relationship of health with happiness, not the way you look with happiness. So the reason why exercise and diet can be so profound or affect us so profoundly in a positive way is not because it changes how we look. It's because it changes how we feel. A healthy, fit body is less likely to be depressed, less likely to be anxious. You have more energy. You're far more resilient. You have more episodes of motivation and inspiration. It's like a machine that works really well. Now, the side effect, and it literally is a side effect of that, is you look like you're more fit and healthy. But what's happened is we've disordered this. We've taken the order of it and played. This is why here at Mind Pump, we've been on air for over a decade. We've never used a single before and after picture to sell a single program, which is, in marketing terms, a terrible, like we've been told by so many marketing agencies that we're stupid, that we're leaving money on the table. And we are. I mean, we could have made 3 times as much money, but again, saving grace, we were all trainers and coaches. It's like, no, that's body focus. It's pointing people in the wrong direction for what is valuable. It goes against our values. And so we're not going to do that. So we've never done it. But so when people hear this, they think, well, how do I do this the right way? Like, I'm doing this because I want to look a particular way. What should I do this for? How should I approach this so that it actually works? But by the way, I'm just going to back up. Doing this for a weight on the scale or for a look in the mirror, there's only 2 outcomes. There's only 2 outcomes from that. If that's what your focus is, these are your 2 outcomes. There's only 2. One, the more common one, is I chase it until I can't anymore and then I stop. So you work out sometimes, you're consistent, you're whatever, and then you stop. And you stop for a while. And then you do it again, and then you stop. And eventually you just stop. You just stop because you're like, this isn't working. That's not working for me. It's not worth it. So I'm not going to do it anymore. That's the more common one. Or you have the fitness influencer types who stay hyper-focused on this and become orthorexic, body dysmorphic, very unhappy, anxious, depressed. Relationships are not deep. They're not connected, and they have a lot of issues. And the issues get worse as they age because as you age, oh my gosh, like how am I going to fix this? More peptides, more hormones, more surgery, like what's going on here? And so those are your 2 outcomes. Now, if you want to be able to do this in a way, and so the question might be, well, why do people stop? How do I do this the right way then? Why is it that I keep stopping? Why can't I stay motivated long enough or stay consistent with this? Well, I'll tell you. If your motivation is I look gross or fat or not good enough or inadequate or too skinny or whatever, you are using exercise as a method of punishment and diet becomes restrictive and you beat yourself up. You hate it because it's coming from a place of hate. You can't hate yourself into better health. It doesn't work. And so eventually this is what happens. Eventually you get sick of hating yourself. You get sick of restricting. You get sick of going to the gym to punish yourself, which by the way feels great at first, right? It's cathartic at first. It's cathartic because you hate yourself so much. You go to the gym, you feel like you're going to throw up. Great workout. But eventually, like, what do people say? I just want to enjoy my life.
Right.
I just want to live my life and not worry about that. And I remember the first time I heard something that really clicked for me. You've probably heard me tell the story, but I was at a dinner with a bunch of tech executives. This was my ex-wife worked at this company. So I was invited to a dinner. So everyone's introducing their spouses. So it comes to me and I'm like, oh, I manage gyms and I'm also a personal trainer. And of course, right away, people are like, oh, don't look what I'm eating and that kind of stuff. But as the conversation started to flow, this woman looks at me and she says, I used to have a friend that was really into exercise and she was real fit and she ate right. And then she got cancer and she died. And after that, I just said, you know what? I'm just going to enjoy my life. And it really clicked for me there because it dawned on me that this woman is not doing one of the few things that you can do that will improve the quality of your life, regardless of the context of your life. Like being more fit and healthy improves everything. Improves your relationships, your attitude, your mood, your sleep, your libido. Everything improves if you're more fit and healthy. And yet this woman said, I'm not going to do this because I want to enjoy my life. And it dawned on me. People are doing this through hate. Of course they hate it. If I go to the gym because I feel gross, I'm beating myself up. If I'm at dinner with my husband or my wife or my friends and pizza is ordered, I'm saying to myself, you better not eat that. You can't have that. Rather than I don't want that, right? Or I want that. So of course, you're not going to be able to do this because you're doing it from a place of tyranny and hate. And so it has to start from the right place. The root has to be right. And what's the root? I'm a person who deserves to be cared for. And I'm a person that deserves better health. So what does that look like? And then you start from there. And then when you go to the gym, you're caring for yourself. And when you eat, you're caring for yourself. And balance is baked into that. Balance is naturally baked into that because sometimes caring for yourself is enjoying the pizza with your friends.
Right.
And connecting over some wine. Most of the time, it looks like eating what we would consider a healthy diet. What does it look like caring for yourself when it comes to exercise? Well, it means that if I'm tired, I go easier. Right. And it means when I have good energy, I go harder. And I don't chase pain. I chase care. I want to feel better at the end of my workout, not worse. Not like I need to crawl out of the gym. So it's got to start from that place. And then what you'll find is you start to enjoy it. And it starts to become one of the tools that you can use to improve the quality of your life. And again, I'll say this again, the other end of this, if you're hard-headed enough like I am, and you just stay on that self-hate train, it will turn into this very dysfunctional relationship. And it's not good, and it doesn't feel good, and relationships suffer, and your health suffers. And unfortunately, a lot of the people that communicate health and fitness in our space are those people. And so the messages that they communicate, the methods that they communicate come from that place. It's like no excuses. Food is just fuel. You say you don't have time, but
24 hours in the day.
Yeah. And it's a terrible failing approach. The fitness industry is massive and has almost done nothing to solve the poor health epidemic. And well, no wonder. Look at the people communicating it. So that's why we started the podcast. That's why we started Mind Pump was, can we communicate this in the right way? And can we do it in a way to where we'll reach people? Because we're competing with, this guy over here who says you can lose 30 pounds in 60 days by taking these pills and beating yourself up. And we're over here telling you, it's going to take you much longer. And it's a slower approach, but it's the only approach that works. Can we sell it better than them? And I think we've proven that we can. And I want this message to continue to spread because it's the other side is, and by the way, I said it takes longer, but the truth is it's not fast versus slow. It's the right way versus it's not going to work.
Right. No, I agree with you 100%. I think that the industry itself is based in performative metrics that have proven in research after research and study after study to not work. I mean, we're at 95% after. So people always thought 80% of diets fail, right? That was the percentage for so long. But if we actually look at the research, when they look long-term past a year, it goes up to 95%. And we continue to do these performative, very restrictive metrics in the industry. We keep speaking to the failure narratives rather than promoting health in a way that is holistic. And people keep failing and yo-yo dieting, and it's only reinforcing their feelings of failure, right? And it's so interesting to hear you speak, because what you're saying and how the podcast came to be, we've just more recently learned from a neuroscience perspective why that happens. I don't know if you've heard of any of the studies on the habenula part of the brain. It's the anti-reward system where anytime the brain perceives failure, pain, disappointment, it's going to drop your dopamine and serotonin to do that thing, and ultimately you're going to lose motivation. And so when we're promoting the before and after picture, or just a weight goal, or looking a certain way, even honestly, one macro target, 1 calorie target, 1 step goal, it says, like you said, there's one of 2 ways to do this. You're either going to hit the target and succeed, or every other option around that target is a failure.
Yeah. And what helps a lot for people that I found is if they start to develop a more complete relationship and a more accurate and complete relationship with exercise and diet. So like with diet, for example, most of our relationship around diet looks like what is palatable, what tastes good, and what's enjoyable. And if that's most of your relationship with food, it's very difficult to eat in a way that is, for lack of a better term, healthy. Okay. And it's actually just it really is a lack of awareness, and a more incomplete relationship. So a lot of times when I would coach people, I would point things out to them that had nothing to do with the palatability of the food. Like, how does it make you feel? How's your sleep? How's your digestion? How's your energy? How did you feel before you ate it versus after you ate it? Why are you eating this? Let's bring awareness to those times when you feel like you get off the rails. And they start to build kind of a more complete relationship, which actually changes your preferences. Okay. And by the way, food companies have known how to do this for a long time. Like, they will make relationships for you. Like, popcorn at the movies, birthday cake at birthdays, like, Corona beer at the beach. They do this because they know it's very powerful, but you can do this for yourself. And one step is to avoid foods that are engineered to kind of hijack all that stuff. So like processed foods, very hard to eat in a healthy way with foods that have been engineered to have drug-like effects. So I often tell people, let's stay away from those for a while, because it's going to be really hard for you to actually have this accurate relationship when you're eating food that has been engineered so incredibly precisely to make you overeat. And they've done a great job at this. So that's one step. The other step is just to pay attention. And it's so funny. Like, I would have clients who we'd start talking about these things, and we'd notice things like they have an energy crash like midday. And then we tied it to their breakfast. And like, it can't be the bagel. I have a bagel every morning. But once we connected the dots and they started to realize it was the bagel that made me feel bloated and tired, they stopped wanting it as much. They just didn't have that. They weren't aware of that connection. There's that really famous, you can watch this on YouTube. I know you've heard me bring this up, where there's a bunch of people passing a basketball back and forth. Have you seen this?
Yeah.
And you have to count. Yeah, and you got to count how many times. And then a guy with a gorilla suit walks through, and you don't even see the guy. At the end, the professor goes, "Did you see the guy in the gorilla suit?" And you go, "No," because you were so focused on how many times people were passing the basketball. So if you stop, slow down, and start to create a new relationship with food, which takes time, you'll actually start to care for yourself better with it. And the same thing is true with exercise. How does this make me feel? Do I have more energy? Do I feel better? How's my mobility? I'd say stay off the scale, because we have such a bad relationship with the scale, which also doesn't tell us much. It just tells us total body mass, doesn't tell us muscle or...
But it'll dictate someone's complete day.
That's right. And then here's another one. Like, one of the reasons why my clients came to me for a decade was because of the relationship that we had. And one thing that the fitness industry has also done, it has taken a communal experience. It has taken the community out of fitness. It has made it very alone. In fact, you don't even listen to the same music as the people around you anymore when you go to the gym.
Right.
Now, those of us who love it and are consistent, no big deal. But if you want to find studies that show consistency with exercise, watch what happens when people show up to a community to exercise. Even a bad workout, people are consistent because they're showing up and seeing their friends. So this is another thing, like communal activity, a good gym culture where you recognize people, working with a coach that's really good, can really help change the relationship that you have with exercise. None of my clients became fitness fanatics, but they all enjoyed working out because they'd come into my small studio. They saw me. They knew the other trainers. They knew the other clients that came at the same time. And it was like, I love going and showing up and seeing these people. And oh, by the way, I'm working out. And that's another thing that we've completely taken away from, because look, relationships are so important to humans. They're so important. And it's interesting because it's funny. I was just reading this book on how people have been pursuing, we look at the rise of anxiety and depression, and they can connect it pretty closely to the rise of duty-free relationships, right? These are friendships that don't require a lot of work. It's kind of like, hey, I know that guy, and hey, what's going on? But we're not really like doing life together, and you don't know my stuff, and I don't know your stuff, and I prefer it that way because it's less work. Meanwhile, we're lonely.
Safer.
It's lonely. It's very lonely. So that's another piece of it, is doing this and doing it with people, whether it's a coach or a good gym culture or a class even, can make a huge difference. And then your relationship around fitness gets molded around this experience, because that's what you need. Look, if everybody listening and watching this right now, if I could snap my fingers and suddenly give them a great experience with fitness and eating healthy, right? Where they enjoy doing it, they'd never stop. That's the key. The key. Now, enjoyment doesn't mean excitement and fun. Sometimes it does, or novelty with my workouts. I tell you what, the clients I trained for 10 years, they did the same workouts. The workouts were the same. Like, there's only so many exercises that I could do with them.
Right.
But it was the experience they had in my studio and with me. And then when I left, because I haven't trained people for over a decade, they're still doing it because they built that relationship. So it all starts there. Now, the X's and O's, we could talk about that. Best way to start, the best forms of exercise. We could start with all that. But like any relationship, it starts one step at a time. If you take 15 steps, your odds of failure are really high. I had a client once, I've talked about her many times. I hope she's okay with this. But she had some of the worst habits and relationship with nutrition and exercise I'd ever seen. She didn't drink water. She never had water. It was soda. She really hated anything that felt like strenuous activity. She just couldn't stand it. Well, she finally came to me. She was referred to me by her doctor, because I trained a lot of doctors at this time. And where we started with nutrition was a glass of water. That was where we started. She's like, I hate water, but I said, do you think you could do it and be consistent with it? And in fact, we started further, but we scaled it down to a glass of water. And that's where she started. And, 3 years later, she lost 20 pounds. She was eating vegetables. She would drink water regularly. She was strength training once a week, and she was walking every day. Massive improvement. But more importantly, she enjoyed it. She would tell me, she's like, I never thought I'd like doing this stuff, but I do now. So that's where we need to start, and it takes time. And so I want people to really understand that. And again, I'm going to say this again, you will never hate yourself into better health. I don't care how you make yourself. I don't care how ripped you think you get. It's not healthy. And you're either going to suffer physically or mentally or emotionally, all three. And we see it all the time. So the approach has to be, I got to change the route. I got to change my heart posture around this. And then what comes out of that is an appropriate application of exercise, and my diet starts to form and shift into something that's more healthy. And I'm going to say this, it's going to feel effortless at that point. It's what you want to do. It's not this like white knuckle struggle the whole time.
Right. No, I love that. I love how you explained it, because that self-respect that people are looking for in these diets and programs that are based out of that hatred, it never comes. But the other interesting thing too is a lot of these programs and approaches really disconnect people from what they truly want, and they disconnect them from themselves, their desires of of their desires around food, their hunger and fullness cues, the palatability of food, their pleasure around food, or trying to force them to not eat the cake with their kids when really that's what they desire in their life, right? And I really think that self-respect piece, so the opposite of the self-hate, is learning yourself. And every single one of the clients that you talked about, it sounds like each person had their own experience, whether it's a cup of water or it's the person who drinks the water and needs to add protein in, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
Learning yourself and how all of this fits into your life, and not even just your life, your season, right? Because everything will eventually change. I mean, even listening to the podcast now for 10 years, I've seen even your stories change and how having, kids and marriage and this and that, we all need to realize not only do we need to learn ourselves, but then learn how to be flexible with that foundation we've created, which is exactly what you're saying.
We have callers on the show. For people who aren't familiar, many of our episodes towards the back half, people will call in and we'll help them out and coach them on air. And recently we had this woman come on, typical question, but I'm only using her because she's just top of mind. She gets on, young mom. So she just had her second kid and she's talking about how she's struggling and she can't find the time and what should my diet be like? I think she was 4 months or 5 months postpartum. And she's asking these, tell me what to do. What's the best workout? What's the best diet? And so we paused for a second and I looked at her and I said, you're doing a great job. And I said, and you're already valuable. And the look on her face was like, she teared up. Like, I didn't expect to hear that, but I think that's what I needed to hear. And so we talked through that process, and it doesn't just make a big difference, it makes all the difference when it comes to success with this. Exercise is supposed to be about improving my health, helping me feel better, and caring for me. That's what exercise is supposed to be. But it's become this distorted thing that we do to punish ourselves, beat ourselves up, or if I do it hard enough or I do it a particular way, it's going to accomplish this look, which again, I'm going to tell you, that's not going to give you what you think you're going to get from it. And so because it's this tool that's been distorted and used in the wrong way, it's not effective. Food is another one. Food is very complex. Gosh, I hate it when fitness influencers communicate food like it's calories, macros, and it's fuel.
Right.
Like, no, it's not. Yeah, part of it. That's part of it, but that's one piece of a very complex. We celebrate with food. Mm-hmm. Entire cultures are built around, have different types of food. You said you're half Hispanic, half Italian. Like, there's two cultures that are completely different. Yeah, we use food to commune. We use food to communicate, to celebrate. The pleasure we get from food is a real value. So is the nourishment we get from the food. Food can be medicine, and it
can be spiritual as well.
It can be very spiritual,
and religions.
Absolutely, but we've taken food and perverted it and twisted it. We've separated it from communing. We've separated the other values and just narrowed it down to what's fast and easy and tastes good. And of course, the result of that is going to be poor health. It starts from a poor relationship. A good coach is able to help and coach people through this process. And I'm telling you, listen, if you work with a good guide and a good coach who understands this, your odds of, you mentioned earlier the stats on 95% fail rate. The success rate is so high when you work with a good guide, and you'll stumble along the way. It's a journey. And you mentioned seasons of life. I had said this earlier, that it'll improve the quality of your life regardless of the context of your life. The context of your life matters. If I just had a baby and I'm not getting good sleep, exercise may be more of a stress relief than anything. If I have pain, exercise can help alleviate that pain. There are those times when I'm going to challenge myself, and the workout's going to be hard because that feels great to challenge and push myself to see how far I can go. Other times it's about, I'm going on this hike, but really it's because I'm hanging out with my friend. We're having a great conversation. Isn't it great, by the way, when you do stuff like that, how you lose track of time and suddenly we've walked this many miles, and it's like, man, but I was just deep in
Happened to me
conversation.
this weekend.
Yeah. So it's really, again, this incomplete picture, and you really have to examine that within yourself, pause, and, poor eating habits. This is a good one. Like, people will get in this kind of binge cycle. Well, they'll find themselves being really good, and then they'll suddenly go, oh my God, I just binged and ate a whole pizza or whatever. Before you're about to do that, pause and acknowledge it. And it sounds so simple. It's not easy, because when we're in that state of mind, the last thing we want to do is acknowledge it. But just say to yourself, I'm about to eat this whole bag of cookies, and it's going to get out of control. And I'm going to tell you right now, you do that enough times and it loses its power.
Absolutely.
By that simple acknowledgement. I had a client once that, we went through a period of tracking because she was just unaware of what was in her food. So I'm like, hey, let's figure this out a little bit. And I ran into my studio. I used to have personal training studios next to a grocery store. And I remember I went into the grocery store and I saw her, and she was walking down the aisle, and they have those bins of candy or chocolate covered almonds or whatever. And she grabbed, and she grabbed a handful of the almonds and she was eating them. And so I walked up to her and I talked to her and I said hi to her, and I said, oh my God, I love, it was just it was a total, wasn't a big deal. I'm like, hey, I love chocolate covered almonds too. Oh my God. And she's like, oh yeah, every time I walk by the aisle, I got to grab a handful. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, do you count that? Do you track it? And she's like, no, I don't. I said, how come? She's like, I didn't even think about it. And so I said, oh. I said, well, now next time you do that, think about that you're grabbing some chocolate covered almonds and that they count. And she's like, I started doing it less because I was just not aware that I was doing it. And all I had to do was be like, oh yeah, I'm doing this thing, and now I'm doing it less. Now this is going to be challenging. I'll let people know right now. It's challenging at first. You're going to want to shame yourself. I'm going to tell you right now. You know what the secret to long-term success in fitness is?
Radical
One word.
accept.
Grace. A lot of grace. Give yourself grace. This is hard. I went off the rails. It's because I was stressed. I was so upset, but I deserve to be cared for. All right, let's try this again. Grace. And a good coach will extend that. That's what a good coach does. And because the shame and the self-hate, we just talked about that earlier, it's a real quick way to spiral into the behaviors that you're trying to get out of.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I think it's important for the listeners to recognize that you are going to continually trip up. I mean, today, some of the things that I've been working on most of my life, I still, even though I think I'm there, there'll be this thing that happens that tells me, oh, you're still that's still subtly showing up in your life in this way. And when I tell my clients, so it's funny the way that you're explaining this, notice it, name it, nurture it. That is literally the steps in my psychological curriculum. Notice, know, so understand it.
Yes.
Notice, name it, nurture it. That's what it is. I've been doing this for a long time and I forgot. And also remind yourself that you are learning and it's a practice. That's what you're talking about, practicing.
Yes.
And it's not failure. It's, okay, that particular thing didn't work for me. I'm going to tweak it, experiment with it, assess it, and try again, and do that over and over and over again until you find that balance.
Yes. And you also have to keep in mind that life is not stagnant. And so challenges keep presenting themselves, and exercise and diet and our behaviors are strongly influenced by circumstances in life. In other words, things can be going great. I'm real consistent. A friend of mine gets sick, or I lose my job, or my wife and I are going through a rough patch, or one of my kids is having trouble in school, or someone dies, or whatever, right? Or I'm getting older, or whatever. New challenge, life has changed. It's going to apply pressure to these behaviors that you think you solved. And so this is an ongoing, you don't really ever fix it because nothing is stagnant. So you're doing great in one season, new season hits, and you're going to have these struggles. That's why you got to give yourself grace, because look, I've dealt with body image, body dysmorphia kind of stuff since I was 14. Abused steroids in my youth, did all kinds of crazy stuff. Again, training people kind of kept me within a certain boundaries, but still just didn't treat myself very well. Got much better with it. And then a new challenge presented itself. Like I just started filming this series. It's a faith-based series, but in this series, I'm working out. And so I'm working out and I'm also talking about my faith. Okay. Now I've never been filmed working out so frequently. Okay. I'm on the podcast. For 10 years, I've done the podcast. I'm talking, and being on camera talking is very different than being on camera and working out. And suddenly I'm very aware of my body, how I look, what I'm lifting. There's comments underneath, and it's starting to challenge me again. And in that process, I start moving into this darker side where I become more obsessed with how much muscle I'm carrying and what I can do to build more muscle, and how much peptides they can use, and can I push the hormones harder? And it's just a different circumstance. And so I got to give myself grace. This is hard.
Absolutely.
One of the things that helps is talk about it. Thankfully, I could talk about it on a podcast so I can bring it to light. But so that's, another thing I really recommend to people is through this process. That's why the coach is so valuable, because you can speak to them about this. But I know what it's like. Most trainers and coaches, if they're honest, know what it's like. And it's a journey. I hate using that term because it's overused. It's definitely a journey. But I'm gonna say this: if you constantly bring it back to, am I worthy of being someone can I care for myself like someone I care about? Can I do this in a way that is really helping me, or at the least be aware of, okay, this is not what I'm doing to myself is not good. It'll bring you back. It'll bring you back, and with consistency, it helps so much.
Yeah. What I found so interesting about your series is how nervous you were. And initially, as someone that was watching it, I thought it was just the vulnerability of talking about your story. But now realizing it was more than that, it was the body part of it.
Yeah, there were two. Actually, I didn't know. I couldn't put my finger on why I was so nervous. I'm never nervous on camera. Right. Never. Not even day one. We started the podcast. I don't know what I was doing, but you put a camera on me, and for some reason, I feel like I'm supposed to do it. Part of it was that. Part of it was I was talking about something that I don't feel like I'm well versed in. I'm speaking faith. I'm talking about my faith. That's another big part of it. And it is much more vulnerable. Like, here's what I'm going through type of deal versus let me teach you some stuff. And so it was very difficult. I'm much more comfortable with it now, but there's definitely moments of those nerves, I would say, for sure. And there's a faith side of me that has some other beliefs around it, but yeah, it was a new feeling. I'll tell you, I'll just say that to you.
No, absolutely. Well, and I wanted to bring that up because I own this because of you.
Wow.
It was interesting. I interviewed Adam 3 weeks after my dad passed away last year in August. And my dad had a very strong faith, and it just kind of opened the door for me. And I remember I had bought this, you had posted about it, and I was like, I have to show him that I'm actually
That's great. That's so great.
And I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to bring up that concept of, focusing on aesthetics and how we look and how we make that our idol.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, you can insert many, many things into that place. But I think for those of the people who are listening who have a faith don't realize how they ultimately are putting, as you said, that disorder. I love how you explain that like it's out of order.
Mm-hmm.
You're putting the way you look, even what you weigh, as your God.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can elaborate a bit on that.
Yeah. So when you look at your values, all the values that are under other values will submit to the higher value. Okay. So your top value is what is your God. And those of us who have a faith, I'm Christian, God is at the top. And if he's not at the top, then things get disordered. But you could also have, and I strongly believe that he put God at the top. He helps order everything. He helps bring everything into order. But for somebody who doesn't have, let's say, a strong faith, if I place my work above my family, then I will sacrifice my family on the altar of my work. So you think of the ancient traditions or ways that, where people would sacrifice animals to their God. You are sacrificing the lesser values to the higher value. So if the way I look is above my health, I'm taking my health and I'm sacrificing it on the altar of how I look. If my kids are higher than my wife, then I'm going to sacrifice my marriage for my kids. And so that's how you have to understand things. And so whatever is at the top, everything twists and bends and is sacrificed ultimately for this God. And if you place your appearance up there, well, now you're going to sacrifice health, relationships. You're going to sacrifice mental health, rest, your work might even be sacrificed for it. If I put money at the top, that's an easy one to talk about because I think a lot of people get that one, but people in fitness don't fully understand what happens when I place how I look too high. But there is a proper order. And one thing you can do is you can list your values and order them in the way you think they should be ordered. And then ask yourself, is that actually how I'm living? Or do I sacrifice these values for that value? Is my family really higher than my work? A lot of men struggle with this one. Or do I sacrifice my family for my work? They're all good values, by the way. It's not like fitness isn't important, work isn't important, but if they're in the wrong order, then you're going to cause some problems. And the classic idols are money, power, pleasure, or what they would say honor, but fame. That's another one too, by the way. You mentioned people on social media, fitness influencers that do it for money. A lot of them don't even make a lot of money. They do it for fame or honor or validation. They don't even make a lot of money. I've met a lot of fitness influencers with a lot of followers who have no business sense. They aren't making very much money at all, yet they keep posting, they keep putting their pictures up there, they keep showing what they're eating, they keep doing this stuff because that's their God. Their God is this honor or what we may call validation.
External validation. Yeah.
That's right. And it is a twisted way to order things, and it will destroy you.
Absolutely. It will absolutely destroy you. I think anytime we place, and as someone who believes in God, obviously he's at the top of my hierarchy. But I think too, the self needs to be under that, right? You, yourself, and your relation to God needs to be next. And I think for a lot of the clients that I work with, that hierarchy is so skewed. And when I show it to people, it's so against what they want and what they believe that they were striving for, whether it was trying to provide for their families, thinking that amount of work that they're putting in is doing good for their family. And I totally understand that concept. But same goes back to that idea of like being aware of it and having those harder conversations with our clients and showing them, are you working from your value system? Are you actually through your behaviors demonstrating who it is that your authentic self and who you want to become, and helping them to realign, right? And helping them reconnect. Now, not all of our clients do I bring in the faith portion of it, but for those who are open to it, absolutely. It's one of my favorite things, actually.
Well, can I, if you don't mind, can I speak to that for a second?
Absolutely.
So if if that's your faith and you're a Christian, this is where it gets upside down. Okay. So in the Bible, it says, seek the kingdom and everything else will follow. And so this is the supernatural side of it. When you seek God first, place him first, keep your eyes on him, repent, pray, then he orders and aligns everything. And so those of us who are Christian know that we need a savior. Like we need it. We're lost. We need a savior. And so it's actually, and it's not easy. It's more simple than me trying to organize everything myself. And that's what I'm finding right now. And so I'm getting a lot of miraculous heart change from simply focusing up and repenting and praying. So where I used to think about doing it myself, and I got to do it this way and do it that way. Now it's a lot of prayer, a lot of talk, a lot of repentance, which is sorrowful. It's not easy to repent, especially when you repent for the same thing every day. And then I'm finding like real, and this is the supernatural side of it, heart change, where my desires are starting to change, which is really wild. Because like I said, when I first started the series, my body dysmorphia got worse. And it was a lot of repenting, a lot of praying. And what I kept hearing from God was just talk about it. Just talk about it. So I did, and I have been. And then there was some moments where I was like, I can't do this. I need help. I can't do this. And he told me to be patient. And I said, well, just keep being an idiot then. And he said, no, keep turning to me. And I'm telling you, it's a hindsight thing. Suddenly I'm like Dylan, who you were on earlier with, who's my producer. He's like, dude, I haven't seen you. You haven't worked out in your tank top in a while. And I'm like, you're right. It's been weeks since I've filmed in my tank top. He's like, and I noticed you haven't been flexing as much in the mirror. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so weird.
Wow.
And so that's the supernatural. So it's just on the faith side. So for people who are Christian, yeah, he does a lot for you for sure.
And I think and we don't recognize this, you said hindsight. You realize, and I try to explain this to clients, again, who are open to these types of conversations, is that even when those hardships come, I mean, losing my dad, there was some struggles in the business, and you had said something earlier, what was it that you said? Trying to do it on my own.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I'm constantly that's a lesson, right? That I'm constantly being taught. And patience, that's the other one. Patience is a big one for me, and surrender ultimately. And I can see even, some of these hardships when I come out of them, like, oh, I see the lesson. And for you, that body dysmorphia and maybe that object was still so sharp, and you hadn't realized that it did still have that sharpness to it in regards to how it affected you, was, why you've gone through this series and gone through the discomfort, and ultimately learn, like, the more I talk about it, the more I share, and the more I surrender in regards to it, I don't want to say the easier it is, but maybe more manageable. How would you describe it?
Yeah, it's a myth that we can do it all, that we have all the solutions, that we can do anything, that we put our mind to. How many times have we heard that? This is very difficult, especially for people like you or me, who've got a lot of worldly confirmation that, oh yeah, you can do it. Put your mind to it. And it's not until you hit a wall and you get thrown down on your knees and you're like, I can't, when you realize. So that's a big one for me. That's, more recent. It's only been a couple of years. And what I've experienced through that is short of miraculous, and both my family and in my own self, my own understanding, my own heart posture. But it had to come from, it started with me. You said surrender. I had to be like, I can't do it all.
Yeah.
I can't do it all.
It's so freeing too.
It is.
It's so freeing.
By the way, this is one of the values, and I'll point back to this for people listening. Working with a really good coach or guide really helps with that. And I got to say, you got to find a good coach, okay? But when you find a good coach, you can outsource it. They'll extend the grace, they'll guide you, and they'll help you develop this relationship with this where it's something that you want to do. But it's doing it on your own is very difficult. You can do it on your own, but people spend so much money on so many different methods. And I tell people, look, if you have money to invest and you want like the best way to make this work with a good coach. There's nothing that comes close to working with a good coach.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, oftentimes when people start our program, I say this is going to be maybe one of the first times in your life where you are going to have someone who is not judging you, who doesn't have expectations really, because again, I'm working with clients, and this is the first opportunity for you to practice asking for help, because you probably haven't been doing it for a good amount of your life, especially for those high achieving individuals. And what's kind of like in the therapeutic world, we call it co-regulation, right? Or even reparenting. There's this aspect of that dynamic of therapist and client where we're reparenting them. In the coaching world, I've adapted that to, this is a way to practice all the things that have been really hard for you to do, to ask for help, to seek guidance, to be vulnerable, doing it in this space. So then you can build the capacity for it to then practice it outside of the space.
Yeah. And another thing too, we should probably cover is what you expose yourself to often also has a strong influence on your behaviors. So social media or media in general can be great, but it oftentimes isn't. And that's, we talked about processed foods before, right? Where they're engineered to make you overeat. Well, social media engineers itself on the fly. So your algorithms change on the fly based off of your behaviors, and they start to feed or speak to these parts of you that are impulsive. And so one of the best things someone can do is turn off social media. Second best thing you can do is consciously change your algorithm. And you can do that. You can put on a picture. There's like a place you could tap. I think it's like there's 3 dots in the left corner, I think on Instagram it is. And you'll say, I want to see less of this, or I want to see more of this. And you got to do it every day. Because if you're scrolling through and you're seeing impossible bodies or the kind of information that is probably not feeding you well, or it's anxiety-based stuff, that becomes your world. That's what you live in. That's what you compare yourself to. So you can change your algorithm. And I tell people all the time, like either get off social media or consciously change your algorithm and change what's around you and what you read and what you put into your body or through your eyes or through your ears. And that has a huge influence. One of the reasons why we do so many podcasts a week, people are always like, why do you do so many shows? We do 5 episodes a week. Part of it was, and we've done that for almost the whole 10 years we've been on air. Part of the reason we did that was so we could get good faster because we sucked. The other part of it was we wanted to be in people's ears. Like, hey, if you're trying to do this and you can listen to us every single day, we think this will help you. And we find that people that listen to us regularly do much better because they get to hear us kind of coach, maybe not directly, but indirectly through the podcast.
Yeah, well, and it's a lot healthier than like you're saying, what you're seeing on social media. No, it definitely has a great impact. And I've found myself even feeling a sense of addiction to it at one point in my life. Again, I have like a before Christ and after Christ moment with my dad's death, like honestly. And like before then, I had life figured out. And then after that happened, like I started going on TikTok and I would just be scrolling and just dissociating. And I knew it happened. It goes back to something you said earlier in regards to seasons and creating change and knowing that a change needs to be had. I think it's important to also note that when you do work on yourself, you have more awareness of what it feels like when things feel good and when things feel balanced and you feel like you're in harmony with yourself. So it is a lot easier to then be aware. Maybe easy is not the word, but for me, I had enough awareness to be like, this is not working for you.
Yeah.
This is hurting you. Because I also know what it felt like on the other side of that, where I was more imbalanced and in harmony with myself. And so I've very much moved away from it, moved more into reading, which with a neurodivergent brain is a challenge in itself, which we could probably talk about in another episode.
Same.
But no, I absolutely agree with you. This has been just so many things. Number one, I think for the audience, your knowledge, and not only your knowledge, but the way you speak so authentically, and you can just hear the care that you have and the people you work with and the information you put out. I think just your genuineness is heard by all. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
But also the vulnerability, and we don't have a lot of these conversations as individuals in this space about the reality of what it does take and the toll that it takes on us to be lean and have these bodies and be in these positions. I mean, it affects us at almost every level: spiritual, emotional, social, relational, we talked about. And so being able to have more of these conversations, I feel like and you have a huge platform to be able to influence the space to make true change that are going to help more people. So Thank you for that. And thank you for taking this time with me today. Let everyone know where they can follow you, even though we're telling them to stay off social media.
Yeah, no. Anywhere, Mind Pump, anywhere you look up Mind Pump. So Instagram, we're on all the social media platforms, but the podcast is what you want. So
Yes.
all podcast platforms and YouTube. YouTube, you can actually watch the show, and it's Mind Pump.
I watch it while I work out. So
Awesome.
You guys are in the gym with me. Thank you so much. For those of you listening, I know that like we've talked about so many different things and a lot of ways that people struggle. And if you feel like this would serve anyone in your life, please share this podcast. I think Sal brings so much knowledge and like I said, vulnerability and understanding to things that a lot of us deal with internally. If you haven't already and you are watching our face, number one, I'm sorry for if there were any glitches in the beginning. We had some technical issues. But if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you're listening to us in your ears, make sure to hit that follow button anywhere you're listening to your podcast. Other than that, Sal and I are going to leave you the same way I do every week, reminding you that what you say in your mind, you see in the mirror. Bye-bye.